While you have probably heard of the Persian and Roman empires, you may not be so familiar with the Parthians. Despite not being as well known, the Parthians built a mighty empire on the foundation of the Persians and were able to thwart the Romans and stop them from conquering modern-day Iran. But who were these mysterious people? And if they were able to defy the might of the Roman Empire, why are they not more well known? The Parni, who became known as the Parthians, were a nomadic tribe in what is now eastern Iran. After the Persian Empire was conquered by Alexander the Great, they briefly became part of his empire before he died without a legitimate heir, leading to a fierce scramble for power. His territories were eventually divided between his generals, with Mesopotamia and other Persian districts going to Seleucus I, who created the Seleucid Empire. Seleucus modeled his empire after the Persian system of government, creating locally governed districts called satrapies that were headed by local satraps, who in turn answered to a centralized power. One of these satrapies under Seleucid rule was Parthia, a district southeast of the Caspian Sea. Amongst the tribes in the Parthian region was the Parni, who are thought to have traveled there after the death of Alexander the Great. In around 250 BCE, while internal wars and conflict plagued the Seleucid Empire, the governor of Parthia rebelled and declared Parthia to be an independent state. The Parni seized this opportunity to take power for themselves. In roughly 247 BCE, a Parni leader named Arsaces was crowned as Parthia's first king. The Seleucid ruler Antiochus III retook Parthia for the Seleucid Empire approximately 40 years later. It had been the custom since the Persians ruled the area that the local rulers were to remain in power while submitting to the central power of the emperor. Antiochus III left Arsaces II, the king of Parthia, in charge as a satrap. The Parthians did not take kindly to being under Seleucid rule, and as soon as the Seleucids left, they deposed Arsaces II and crowned Phreapatius, once again declaring their sovereignty. Luckily, the Seleucids were preoccupied with conflicts with the Romans, which resulted in the Treaty of Apamea in 188 BCE. The treaty placed severe restrictions on the Seleucid military, which the son of Phreapatius, named Phraates, took full advantage of by attacking the empire and gaining regions to the east and southwest. Phraates' brother and heir, Mithridates, made Parthia into an empire in its own right. Mithridates I came to power in 171 BCE and quickly began conquering neighboring territories. By 141 BCE, Mithridates had taken the Seleucid capital of Seleucia, and by 140 BCE, he had brought a large chunk of Mesopotamia, including Babylon, under Parthian rule. By all accounts, Mithridates was a liberal ruler and was known as Philhellene, or Greek-loving, suggesting that he did not clash with his Greek subjects. By most accounts, life under the Parthians was better than under the Seleucids. Seleucia was allowed to keep its government and relative autonomy, and the Parthian troops did not occupy the city. Instead, they set up a garrison nearby called Ctesiphon. Ctesiphon would gradually grow in size until it replaced Seleucia as the empire's capital. The Parthian Empire continued to grow and first came into direct contact with the Roman Empire in 96 BCE. The Seleucid Empire was in decline at this point, and the Parthians were eager to take advantage of the power vacuum. Around 5 years earlier, Mithridates II had introduced the title of King and Kings of the Parthian rulers, a title that the Assyrians and the Persians had previously used. Due to their expansion and ever-growing power, it was inevitable that the Parthians would come into conflict with the Romans. In the hope of avoiding unnecessary warfare, Mithridates II organized a meeting with Roman representative Sulla and sent an envoy named Oribazes to the Euphrates with a request for alliance and friendship. Although there is evidence that Sulla took control of the meeting, which embarrassed the Parthians, causing Mithridates II to order the execution of Oribazes, both powers agreed to make the Euphrates a loose border between the two empires. There was peace between the two realms for over 30 years, albeit an uneasy one. While the two empires favored diplomacy over warfare, many of their exchanges were tense and hostile, eventually leading to physical conflict. One such meeting happened in the spring of 53 BCE between the Roman general Marcus Licinius Crassus and the Parthian king Orodes II. Crassus had moved troops across the Euphrates, and Orodes demanded that he explain these actions. Crassus retorted he would give answers in Seleucia, to which Orodes replied that Crassus would grow hair on his palm before he would see Seleucia. Soon, diplomacy disintegrated, and the ambitious Crassus went to war against the Parthians. Crassus led 7 legions into Parthian territory, but they were lured into the desert, where they were defeated by a small Parthian force of mounted archers in the Battle of Parry. Crassus's earlier bravado came back to haunt him when he was killed attempting to re-establish negotiations. This clash made the Parthians understandably wary of the Romans. As the Parthians had defeated the Romans and captured several Roman standards, all with a significantly smaller force, the Romans desired revenge. In an attempt to expose the vulnerability of the Romans, in 52 BCE, the Parthians sent a small force into Syria, only to be repelled by Cassius. The following year, they sent a larger force and attacked the Roman provincial capital of Antioch, but were defeated again. However, the fighting was interspersed with aid for various Roman factions during times of infighting. During the 40s BCE, Orodes aided Roman factions that were rising against Julius Caesar, as well as his heirs, Mark Antony and Octavian. His motives for this are disputed, with some speculating that he was attempting to destabilize Rome, and others feeling that he wanted to build bridges between the Parthians and the Roman factions that may have been open to an alliance. By 40 BCE, with his prospective allies defeated, Orodes invaded Syria again, sending his son, Pacorus, and a full-scale army. However, their success only lasted a few years before they were again expelled from Syria. In response, Mark Antony decided to invade Parthia. Despite some minor successes, his campaign was ultimately unsuccessful. In one disastrous move, Antony left his baggage train to surprise the enemy. It turned out the small troop of Romans guarding the supplies were the ones surprised when the forces of Parthian king Phraates IV slaughtered them, destroyed the Roman supplies, and made off with more Roman standards. By the time Antony retreated from Parthia, he had lost 32,000 of his 100,000 men to war and bad weather. Civil war broke out in Rome before Antony could head another campaign in Parthia. After his death, diplomacy was reinstated, with Octavian and Phraates ushering in another period of uneasy peace between the empires. Both empires had their sights set on Armenia, but despite years of invasion attempts by both, the powers had avoided direct conflict. All that ended in around 58 CE, when Parthian king Vologases I installed his brother on the Armenian throne. Upon receiving this news, the current Roman emperor, Nero, quickly mobilized his troops. After years of fighting, which resulted in victories and defeats on both sides, an agreement was reached that Vologases' brother, Tiridates, would ceremoniously and publicly remove his diadem and place it at the feet of a statue of Nero. Then Tiridates would travel to Rome, where he would be crowned king of Armenia. Peace reigned once again between the two rivals until 113 BCE, when the Parthian contender, Osroes I, installed his nephew Parthomasiris as Armenian king without seeking formal approval from the Roman Emperor Trajan. After installing Parthomasiris, Osroes sent gifts, a peace offering to Trajan, and a request to send a diadem to Parthomasiris. Trajan rejected the gifts and began to mobilize his troops. Parthomasiris then sent a communication to Trajan, but foolishly signed it from the king of Armenia, to which Trajan refused to reply. Parthomasiris tried again, foregoing his title, with still no response. After this inauspicious start, a meeting was finally arranged, prompting the hope of diplomacy. But this was not to be. First, Parthomasiris arrived late, upsetting the Romans. Then, when he placed his diadem at Trajan's feet, instead of returning it as per tradition, Trajan declared he would hand Armenia over to no one, since it belonged to the Romans and would have a Roman governor. Trajan then annexed Armenia and actually managed to conquer Parthia by 115 CE, achieving what no other Roman had before. However, his success was short-lived. By 116 CE, there were rebellions in both Armenia and Mesopotamia. To add to Trajan's problems, the Jews started to revolt in the eastern Mediterranean and Egypt, although it is unclear whether these uprisings were a coordinated effort or just coincidental. Trajan was forced into a compromise wherein he returned part of Armenia to the Parthians in exchange for peace. With great pomp, he crowned Osroes' estranged son as king of Parthia before falling ill and dying in 117 CE. Over 4 decades of peace followed between the Parthians and the Romans. It appeared the Romans had realized it was too costly to try and expand into the Parthian Empire. Then, in 161 CE, the Parthians, under King Vologases IV, once again flexed their military muscles and ousted the Romans from Armenia. Again, this resulted in a prolonged Roman campaign against the Parthians. These wars continued until 217 CE, when the last battle between the two empires resulted in a bloody Parthian victory, which led to negotiation and a settlement. Even though the Parthians had come out on top in their final conflict with the Roman Empire, they had been weakened by decades of war. It fell in 224 CE and was replaced by the Sasanian Empire, which continued the Parthian tradition of being a thorn in the side of Rome. Seeing as how the Parthians were able to withstand the mighty Roman Empire, it seems strange that they are relatively obscure. This disparity is probably due to the limited written records, with most information coming from external sources. It could also be down to the popularity of Greek and Roman history in Europe. While the Victorians were fascinated with ancient Greece and Rome, the empires and history of the Middle East were often overlooked. This trend continues in the West today. Historically, there was always more of a cultural exchange between Greece, Rome, and the West than with the Middle East. Thankfully, this is shifting, and we can now gain more appreciation and understanding of these mighty empires. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the Parthians, check out our book, Parthian Empire, a captivating guide to the enemy of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.